See some familiar faces and some new faces. So you are at the fiscal year 26 Community Development Fund Notice of Funding Availability Workshop. So if you've done this before, we'll be walking through the sort of the Notice of Funding Availability, giving you kind of tips on what we're looking for, qualifications, things like that. And then we always try to kind of add a technical assistance kind of capacity building thing to the end of that. So if you're able to stay, that would be great. We have a wonderful speaker who's going to be talking about conflict resolution in organizations. And I've worked with her before. She's an executive coach and she's great. So we're excited she's able to come. So, and if you could mute yourself if you're not. There's somebody who doesn't seem to be muted.
Yeah, shortly after me, because I want to get.
I don't know.
So we will be recording and posting this. We also will share the slides as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Can you all see my slides? Can anybody see?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. I can't see you now because it's on the screen. So yell if you can't, you can't see anything. So our agenda is we're going to talk about the Community Development Fund framework. We're going to talk about the purpose and requirements of the NoFA, application instructions and questions. And then, as I mentioned, we have a workshop on Don't Let Conflict Ruin Your Culture. So just to introduce the team, I'm Jennifer Daniels. I manage the Community Development Fund. Our staff who all work really hard at this program are Zina Abdul Rahman, who is the Administrative Grant Specialist. She is the person who will be nagging you for reports. If you already are a subrecipient, you know Zina. Caitlin and Rolda are community development planners who you should also know if you're an ongoing subrecipient. They are project monitors. So if you do receive a grant, you'll be working with one of them as sort of your project manager. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that are new this year. So if you're an ongoing subrecipient, this might be your best takeaway. So the maximum requested amount for public service programs is now $35,000, not $50,000. And we'll talk a little bit more about what public service programs are and why we've made that change. Also beginning in fiscal year 2026, which is next July, we're going to be doing some restructuring, and this may include fewer grants being funded at higher amounts. So in the past, we have funded, I think this year we have like 38 grants, and for several reasons, we're kind of rethinking what we do. One of the reasons being for years and years, we funded $20,000 grants or so, and we're realizing that that is actually it isn't enough to make a huge difference for a lot of organizations. And so we and the Community Development Citizens Advisory Committee have talked about really doing larger grants for fewer organizations, because that really can provide more impact to those organizations. Another new this year thing is, as many of you may know, the county has been releasing several other notices of funding availability, including there was one that came out last year that was the Rebuilding Trust in Government. And I think several organizations got funding for that. So that may not be counted towards leverage at this point. So if you get other county grant funding, that's wonderful. But as you're doing your budget, do not include the county grant funding, and we'll talk more about that. So just an overview of the Community Development Fund. So it is a competitive grant program. There's an annual application process. There are 4 different funding sources, which doesn't matter that much to you because you're not going to apply for a specific one, but just to give you a little bit of context about what they all are and what the requirements are. There is the Federal Community Development Block Grant, the Local Affordable Housing Investment Fund, the Community Services Block Grant, which is both federal and state funding, and the State Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. And each of these has different requirements, different eligibility and reporting requirements. So we'll talk a little bit about each of those. So CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, and CSBG, Community Services Block Grant, are both one-year renewable grants. So if you are awarded that, that is a grant that you will get for 1 year, and then you can reapply. The Affordable Housing Investment Fund, which is the Local Housing Trust Fund, is awarded for 2 years and is non-renewable. So the intention behind this funding source is it's really for startup, innovative sort of seed money projects. So the idea is to give a chunk of money for 2 years for a program to get started. So that's sort of the way that we address startup programs. If you are awarded the AHIF grant, if you were awarded it last year, you don't need to reapply this year. There are different kinds of grants that we're able to fund, and this depends on our funding sources. So what we call public services, actually what HUD calls public services, as I mentioned, you're eligible to request up to $35,000, and that's a lot of the programs that many of you all run. So that's eviction, homelessness prevention, job training, health-related programs, youth and senior programs, immigration legal services. So really a lot of the programs that are not sort of bricks and mortar are considered public services. So you're eligible to request up to $35,000. Other programs are eligible up to $100,000, and that is housing development. So if you're doing bricks and mortar programs, home ownership counseling that leads to property acquisition, a housing rehabilitation, certain economic development programs are eligible for higher than 35 or not considered public service. So that is micro enterprise loan kinds of programs are eligible up to 100,000. As I mentioned, so job training is considered public services, small business development is considered other. So those are HUD requirements. And if you have questions, feel free to ask us. And then we always have this disclaimer, federal funds are awarded through the federal appropriations process, so funding availability may not be known until spring 2024. So we go through this process now. We may or may not know what our funding amount is until much later. So we do try to be as consistent as possible, but just so you know, we may have to change recommendations. So just a quick snapshot of previously funded programs. Yeah. Lots of different kinds of programs, economic development, health services, homelessness prevention, housing, immigration, job training, neighborhood revitalization, other public services, which is, things that don't fall in one of those categories, technology and youth programs. So it's a pretty broad range of funding. So general eligibility requirements. You must be a nonprofit 501c3 organization that is serving Arlington residents. You don't need to be based in Arlington, but we will only fund a program that serves Arlington residents. It must be responsive to the goals and objectives of the 5-year consolidated plan, and Caitlin will talk a little bit more about that later. Activities must be delivered from an ADA and Section 504 compliant location. If your office, for example, is not ADA compliant, then you need to have an alternate place that you're able to deliver your activities. Programs sponsored by faith-based organizations are eligible, but they must deliver services and outreach regardless of program beneficiary religious affiliation. And of course, we can't fund any sort of religious programming. You must serve primarily low to moderate income beneficiaries, and the income guidelines vary based on funding source, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And as I mentioned before, applicants don't apply for a specific funding source. So you'll apply to the Community Development Fund program in general, and then staff will kind of figure out what the potential match is during the review process. So I'm going to briefly talk about each of the funding sources, just again, so you have a sense of what they are. So CDBG is a federal program, and it must comply with Title 24 of the Code of Federal Regulations. It must respond to a CDBG national objective. Excuse me, we can talk more about that if you're interested. The one that we primarily use in Arlington is to serve low and moderate income people. That's a national objective. And you can serve clients who are up to 80% of the area median income. Excuse me. Direct assistance or income payments are not eligible under CDBG. So rent assistance, subsidies, gift cards, anything that goes directly to beneficiaries is not eligible under CDBG. We can really pay for program costs, not for direct assistance. Additional federal compliance requirements might apply. There are many. If that's the case, we'll let you know. If it's a public service program, it's likely that many of these won't apply. If it's sort of more bricks and mortar, more capital projects, then we will talk with you about what could potentially apply. So the Affordable Housing Investment Fund is, again, the county's local trust fund. There is some money that is laid aside for services. And the eligible programs generally involve services that directly support residents of committed affordable housing units or living in market rate affordable units, but they tend to be sort of housing based. They must be related to housing or economic stability. And as I mentioned, they're generally reserved for new startup demonstration projects or involve the expansion of a current program. So think something that you want to get started, you're looking at to have sort of seed money to get it started. Similarly, direct assistance is not eligible under AHIF. And we use the same income and reporting requirements for AHIF that we do for CDBG. So you can serve clients up to 80% of the area median income. Community services block grant programs must comply with Title 45 of the Code of Federal Regulations. So you can read all this for fun. CSBG can serve clients up to 200% of the federal poverty level. And actually in the regulations, CSBG can serve clients up to 125% of the federal poverty level. But when COVID hit, they raised that in the budget process. So it is still up to 200% in the budget process, has not been changed in the regulations. So until we hear otherwise, we'll continue to use the 200% federal poverty level. So you can serve people at slightly higher incomes. Direct assistance may be eligible under CSBG, but please do discuss that with us, kind of what the potential options are. Community Services Block Grant, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or CSBG TANF, is money that comes through the state. It can also serve clients up to 200% of the federal poverty level. There are some specific requirements that are related to the TANF regulations. It's used for families who must include a minor child who resides with the family. Services or payments cannot be considered assistance, and we can talk more about that if you'd like. And all costs must relate to one or more of the following: work subsidies, education and training, childcare, transportation, and non-recurrent short-term benefits, which cannot extend beyond 4 months. So this funding is really intended for people looking for jobs or getting some sort of economic assistance. So this is just a snapshot of the income limits for this year. This is on our webpage. It's also in the NoFA, and it will update you as it changes. But just so you get a sense of kind of what the income limits are for who you can serve for each funding source. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin to talk more about the details of the application.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Okay, so again, I'm going to talk a little bit about the required elements of your proposal. So the first thing that you need to think about when looking to submit a proposal is that any applications have to respond to one of the 4 goals of the consolidated plan. So the county creates a consolidated plan every 5 years. It's required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for us to be able to receive our funding. And this is a broad planning document for housing and community development goals. And the goals of the consolidated plan directly translate as a priority areas for the Community Development Fund. So goal 1 is to create and sustain affordable housing. And so the goal of this area is intended to support programs and projects that work to increase the supply of committed affordable housing, improve owner-occupied housing, rehab or repair housing, and assist households in becoming homeowners. Goal 2 is to promote healthy and self-sufficient families. And so similarly, Arlington wants to ensure that our households are able to stay in their housing. And so goal 2 focuses on programs that help to develop economic self-sufficiency and skills, as well as increasing well-being to help stabilize families and prepare the workforce for the changing economy. If you go to the next slide. Goal 3 focuses on efforts to reduce the presence of homelessness in the community and stabilize families at risk of homelessness through the provision of permanent supportive housing, rapidly rehousing homeless persons, and providing emergency housing. And then goal 4 is to foster vibrant and sustainable neighborhoods. And so this area includes programs that where we're inspecting committed affordable housing, conducting community events and informational workshops, and neighborhood cleanups. So those are the 4 priority areas for the next 5 years, or next couple of years, because we're in, I think, year 4 of the consolidated plan. If you're submitting a proposal for this year, you have to ensure that your project meets one of those priorities, or it cannot be considered for this funding source. Let me go to the next slide. So this is just a quick snapshot of the timeline for the 2026 NoFA. So proposals are going to be due on Friday, September 6th. After your proposal is submitted, they will be reviewed by both staff and the Community Development Citizen Advisory Committee between September and November. Something to keep in mind is that during the month of October, the county will invite applicants that have submitted eligible programs to provide a proposal presentation or attend a Q&A session with the Community Development Citizens Advisory Committee. And those sessions will be held on October 2nd, 9th, 16th, 23rd, or 30th. You will be assigned a date and time. We're generally pretty flexible on the time of an evening, but it is challenging to reschedule the date. So just keep that in mind when we reach out to you. We can try to be as flexible as much as possible, but we are generally scheduling about 40 different applicants during the month of October, so it can get a little challenging to move things around. So once the Q&A sessions happen, staff then goes back and starts to develop the program recommendations, which are then folded into the county manager's budget, which is generally released in February. So the one for 2026 will be released in February 2025. We then will hold a public hearing with the Community Development Citizens Advisory Committee in March. The county board holds a budget hearing during that month as well. And then the final budget is adopted in April. And then once the budget has been adopted, the funds for 2026 will be available on July 1st, 2025. As far as submitting a proposal, all proposals must be submitted online via Zoom Grants, which is an online application software. These are just some quick links, and we will be sending out the presentation after this, and so you can look at these videos later. But essentially, it's just information about how to apply, how to set up an account, how to navigate the system. As far as proposal requirements, these are the 4 main areas that you need to be focusing on when submitting your application. So focusing on the proposal narratives, which is where you'll be submitting all the information about your program and kind of telling us about what needs it's meeting and sort of what the goals of the program are. You'll be submitting a proposal budget and narrative. So you'll be explaining what the request is as far as the community development funds, and then what other funds you have secured to support the program as well. And then in this section, you'll also be writing a budget narrative just to further describe what's in that table. You'll also be submitting your performance measures, which helps to show exactly how you intend to measure the performance of your program over the program year. And then there are several attachments that are included in the Zoom Grants application. Just note that most of the attachments are optional during proposal submission. There's just a few that are required, including your articles of incorporation, bylaws, and your IRS tax exempt status. Other than that, the other documents are optional, although most will be required if you are awarded a grant for monitoring purposes. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the specific NoFA questions that you'll be responding to for this year. Just a quick note that the application questions have been altered a little bit in terms of the order. So we've kind of switched around the order. We've combined some questions to try to, reduce some of the duplication in, what was what we were asking in previous years. So just keep that in mind, that it will look a little bit different when you go into your to the Zoom Grant application for this year. So the first section is where you're going to be talking about the community need. And so you'll be describing and documenting the extent and nature of the unmet need that your proposal will address. So in this question, you want to talk about, the specific data or evidence that is identifying the local need that your proposal will address, whether your project is going to serve an underrepresented or non-traditional group that has barriers to accessing services, and whether there are populations who are adversely impacted by the problem your proposal proposes to address. You should also talk about what makes your program unique or different from existing services. So is the unmet need being addressed in the community, or is it not being addressed to the extent that is needed? Why is your program or organization uniquely situated to help solve the problem? And just try to demonstrate in this question if there are other organizations that are currently working to solve this problem or a similar problem. As far as the next section is where you'll talk about sort of the overall project design. So the first question is where you'll provide a brief project synopsis. So you'll want to make sure you have a well-structured scope of work so that the reviewer can tell upfront what population is being served and what the program is attempting to accomplish. You want to include a work plan that describes your program activities and generally just sort of a roadmap that lists all the various steps and activities that will be required to deliver your proposed programming. You'll also want to talk about the designated timeframe for your project. And so this will also include your work plan that describes the general flow of the program. So what do you plan to do in months 1 through 3, 4 through 6, and 7 through 9? So be very clear about sort of how you intend to offer your programming over the program year. The next question, you'll be defining the geographic scope. And so this is where you'll talk about where the program will be operated from. So if maybe it's a community room of an affordable housing property, or maybe you have your own brick and mortar location. You'll also want to note in the application if the program will be serving a specific Arlington neighborhood, or if you're going to be serving Arlingtonians countywide. You'll also want to differentiate how many Arlington clients you serve versus clients from neighboring jurisdictions through your program. In the next section, this is where you're going to talk about your organizational capacity and experience. So the first question, you're just providing a brief description of your organization. So you can talk about the history of your organization, your mission, your goals, programs, future plans, and really try to demonstrate why your organization cares about the issue that you're proposing for the program is proposing to solve. In the next question, you'll want to describe your organization's demonstrated ability and capacity to carry out this program. So what is your experience in the community with the population you're proposing to serve? How is your organization uniquely positioned? You'll want to include the organization's experience with addressing the unmet need. You'll want to talk about your staff's qualifications, expertise, and experience in this section. The next section, if your program has received a Community Development Fund grant in the past, this is where you'll talk about the impact that your prior year funding has had on the community. So you can talk about an assessment of your program's prior year performance. How has your organization met or exceeded its goals? How has your organization impacted the unmet need? And how will the additional funding contribute to further addressing the unmet need? Actually, I think I'm going to take my headphones out because I think my headphones just died. Sorry about that. Okay, next slide. So the next section, this is where you'll talk about collaboration with other organizations. So if you're proposing to collaborate with other organizations on this project, we do highly recommend, thinking about collaborative submissions. But if you do submit a project with another organization, you'll want to identify a lead agency, the one that will be contracting with the county. And so your application needs to explain the nature of the collaboration, the history between the two organizations, why the collaboration is necessary, and how the services provided by each organization will complement one another. You should also, if you are submitting a collaborative submission, provide a brief description of the partner organization that will be involved in the implementation of the program. And so you can include the history, the mission, the staff who will support the program, and also demonstrate the executive and board support of the project from both organizations. So the next section, this is where you'll talk about how you plan to evaluate your program. And so for the first question, this is where you'll talk about the program's goals and intended outcomes. And so what you'll really want is for the reviewer to clearly be able to pinpoint long-term goals and intended outcomes of the program. And so as far as the program goals, these are generally the intended results and what the organization anticipates will be accomplished by the program. Outcomes are the clear benefit that the program participants will receive based on the program activities. So for example, the goal of a job training program could be to help stabilize families and ultimately decrease barriers to employment. And the outcome of the program would be that the participant gained employment as a result of the training program or increased their hourly wages. So just be sure you're specific for this question. In the next question, you'll be asked to provide or discuss what consolidated plan goals and objective you think your program will address, and it's just a checklist. So you'll say, I think my program is going to address goal 2.6. But then in the next question, in question 3, this is where you'll elaborate a little bit more about how your program is consistent with or will address the consolidated plan goal and objectives. So we're just asking for a little bit more detail about why you think your program addresses each of those goals and objectives this year. If you go to the next section, this is the evaluation plan. And so this is where you'll detail intended outcomes and outputs for the program and how you intend to measure the performance of the program. And so you're not only talking about what exactly you're going to be counting, both the outputs and the outcomes, but also the methodology you'll be using to obtain the data. So, if you're saying that you're going to, you're holding a job training workshop, that's the output could be the number of participants who participate in the workshop. And so the methodology for how you obtain the data is I'm going to use, attendance sheets at the beginning to make sure that to keep track of who's attending. And we're going to ask their income and demographics this way. So that's the kind of information we're looking for in this question. And so for the next section, this is the long-term strategy. So you're going to be describing the long-term strategy or plan for your project and meeting the intended program goals. And so this is basically where you're, where you're going to discuss how you're going to meet your goals over the long term. If there's a final outcome that the program is hoping to achieve, you can put that here. And really, how will you know that that outcome has been achieved? And so the next section is where you're going to talk about your budget and the leverage, and this is where the leverage score will be calculated from. And so the budgets will be completed in the budget tab of Zoom Grants. And so just make sure that you keep that in mind when you're completing your application, that the budget is actually filled out in a separate section from the proposal narratives. And also ensure that you're not only including the budget, but also your budget narrative. And so you want to include all the sources that have been secured to carry out the program, and just because that also impacts your leverage score. So the other thing that we'll want you to include here is if you are requesting additional funds over the amount awarded from previous years, so these are for programs that have been awarded funding in previous years, you'll also want to describe in detail what the additional funds are going to be used for. So this is where you'll talk about how your project is going to build upon previous years. What are you going to be doing differently? Are you going to be hiring additional staff? Are you giving your staff a raise? Or do you need additional materials for your program? This is where you'll want to really kind of explain what that money will exactly be used for. So as far as some budget tips, one of the things that we like to point out is that, you should, but when you're filling out your application, be sure to confirm that the items you're requesting for the Community Development Fund are allowable under the Uniform Administrative Requirements cost principles. This is published at 2 CFR Part 200, and this is where all allowable costs are detailed in the Code of Federal Regulations. So, for example, allowable costs include salary, materials, and rent. If you can directly tie these costs to the activities and beneficiaries of your proposed project, this is a direct cost. Allowable costs that can't be tied directly to the project, such as general rent or salaries of administrative staff, those are considered indirect costs. So all federal grants are allowed up to 10% indirect costs unless you have a federally negotiated indirect cost rate. But if you do have a federally negotiated indirect cost rate, you'll want to include documentation for that in your application. And so just make sure that you're indicating that in your budget narrative. And just another quick reminder that for the purposes of this grant program, overhead and indirect costs are generally the same, considered the same thing. Make sure that when you're putting your budget together that salary costs and fringe costs must be specifically and clearly attributed to each staff person working on the project. So you don't want to lump all salaries into one line item. It helps us to determine exactly how many people are going to be working on the grant. And that's the same for operating costs. So don't, if you're doing a after-school program, for example, don't lump food and materials into the same operating expenses line item. In the budget narrative, make sure that if you're requesting funding for staff, please specify position titles, hourly rates, estimated number of hours to work in the because that helps us to again determine who exactly is going to be working on this program and how our funds will be supporting the individuals who are supporting the grant. And then again, make sure you do include your indirect cost rate. If it is federally negotiated, include the documentation, and otherwise you're eligible for up to 10% of allowable costs. So finally, the last question that you'll be asked to respond to is really just about program sustainability. So providing a detailed plan for, how your project will eventually become achieve economic independence. So can your program become financially self-sufficient? When do you expect that to happen? If you didn't receive community development funding, how would you continue to support and grow your program over the long term? And just really try to be specific here. You're allowed to attach up to 3 letters of support from either program beneficiaries or program partners. So make sure that you do that in the Documents tab. That is a really great way to demonstrate that there is support for your program from both your partners and your stakeholders. And the reviewers do really like to see those. So finally, another thing that is a little bit different this year is the evaluation criteria. We tried to match that up a little bit better with the revised application questions. So just keep that in mind when you're filling out your application. And actually, Jennifer, you want to go to the next slide. When you're filling out your application, that this is the what your program will be evaluated against, and that does line up directly to the application questions and sections that I just talked about. And so finally, just some quick proposal tips. Make sure you're reading the notice of funding availability carefully for eligibility requirements. Again, there are different eligibility requirements for each of the funding sources, so just keep that in mind when you're putting together your program. Again, it's really important to document leveraged sources for your program, such as in-kind sources. So if you're using volunteers, make sure you're including that in your in-kind sources because that will count towards your leverage score. Again, please do consider supporting attaching those letters of support. Again, the reviewers do like to see those, and it's a really great way to show community support for your program. And then finally, county staff is always happy to answer questions about your proposal. If you have a program idea and you're not quite sure if it would be eligible, or if you want to sort of get some ideas about how to really document whether it would be a good program, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to have those conversations. I do a lot of those per week, and I think it's a great way to just get a better sense of what you're thinking about. And we're happy to provide some insight and some help there if you need it. So I think that's it. And so we can start with questions if anyone has anything before we move on to the workshop.
And I think there were a couple of questions in the chat. One of the questions that I didn't answer are the word or character limitations for responses. Caitlin, can you respond to that?
Yeah, so most questions have a 3,000 limit, character limit. There are some that are a little bit different, but you should be able to see that in Zoom grants when you're filling out your answers. That's a really good point, though, to think about not only the character limits, if you are, if you're creating your, if you're responding to the questions in, say, Word or another system, and you intend to copy them over into the system later, make sure you're paying attention to that when you are, when you finally do paste it over, because there have been times in the past where someone has submitted an application and the answer is cut off at the end because they did not know that there was a character limit. So again, I think it goes, the max limit for most questions is 3,000 characters without spaces, and that there are some that are a little bit less because they just didn't seem like they needed as many words.
Great, thank you. Oh, and Karen says, I believe the de minimis rate is going up to 15% on October 1st, 2024. Okay. So we will confirm that and then change that in the NoFA. So what that would mean for you all is that you can actually use an indirect rate of up to 15%, which I know will be helpful. It's hard to run a program with a 10% indirect. What are the reporting requirements? Oh boy, we can, depends on your funding source. We do require quarterly reports from you. The reporting will happen in Zoom grants, and depending on the funding source, there are different reporting requirements. And we are happy to talk with you. Lynn, do you have specific questions, or was it more about timing? Feel free to jump in if you want. Essentially, for any grant, we
Sorry,
need.
I couldn't unmute. It wasn't
That's okay.
unmuting for me. I guess, so we're Fairfax County based, but we serve a lot of Arlington people. And so I guess I was wondering, how much, what are the demographics and things like that? How much do you require? It's a little more difficult for us to get the information from Arlington clients because we're working through partners. And so I was just kind of looking to see just broad-based. I understand if you're under different funding streams, there's different things, but do they have to be legal? Do they have to be, and you
we do not, with federal funds, technically, you're not allowed to serve undocumented residents, but because you all are nonprofits, you don't need to check. So,
okay.
So there's no need to check whether your clients are documented residents or not.
Okay.
Typically, what we'll need is, depending on the funding source, sort of the income levels. Generally, people can self-certify, and sometimes even that can be hard. If it's a neighborhood-based program, sometimes we don't need to do that because you can sort of make assumptions based on what the neighborhood is.
Right.
That tends to be more unusual, though. And then we require race and ethnicity.
Okay.
If it's CSBG funded, those of you who have CSBG funding know the joys of it. There's like 3 pages of stuff. So it depends, you have to look at different income sources, and there's all kinds of different requirements. So keep that, and you might want to look at, or we can talk to you about sort of what the requirements are before you consider applying, because we don't want to get in a position where we do fund a project and then you're not able to meet the reporting requirements. So if you want to kind of talk more detail, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, so I'll reach out to you separately about possible
Okay,
data sharing with organizations and things like that. So
okay.
Thank you.
No, we're sorry that our reporting requirements can be awful, but
no, they're like that everywhere. It's not just here.
Yes. All right. If we've received prior year funding, how far back should we go? Christy, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Sorry, I was trying to type it quickly. In the question, in the narrative section where it says if you've received funding in the past, talk about your past performance. So I was just wondering, do you just want the previous year? Should we just reference the previous year, or if we've had the grant for several years, should we, talk about the whole time we've had the grant?
I mean, I think whatever makes sense. We don't have a really specific requirement. If you've been funded for a number of years, of course, we love to see impact over a number of years. If you're able to do that, a lot of times people don't because they might not track clients over a period of years. So it really, I think, depends on your program and what's easily available for you. In a perfect world, of course, you'll say you've been funded for 5 years and we've done all these amazing things and we can track all of it. But we know that doesn't always work that well. So. And I will say, we do use if you got funded last year, we will use your final report from last year to assess this year's application as well. And the Community Development Citizens Advisory Committee will do that as well. So we at least have your data from the previous year. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, we have standing partners who are very supportive of all of our projects, but we do not jointly apply for this grant or develop a specific plan for this grant application. That's fine. I mean, that's not a requirement. The reason why we ask that is, Arlington is a small place, and really the most effective programs collaborate with each other. A lot of you work with the same clients. So just if you can demonstrate that you're connected with other organizations, that you make referrals, I mean, any way that you can show that you really do understand the clients that you work with and you collaborate. So whatever that looks like for you is great. What is the maximum grant a CDFI can apply for? So I guess it depends on what you're looking. for the funding for. Can you, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce her name, Mulalam, can you?
Well, and I think
Clarify
that,
that?
you know, the maximum grants is not necessarily based on the organization. It's based on the program type. So if you're applying for, you know, an economic development program through your CDFI, then you would be eligible for up to 100,000. But if it's a public service program, again, the cap is at 35,000.
And feel free to reach out to us again. We're really happy to talk about any sort of program ideas. So how do we answer the question of whether we will have collaboration on this project? Again, you know, just to the extent that you work with other organizations, we know that you guys work with many other organizations. So just, you know, kind of discuss how you do that. What do we mean by implementation in the designated time frame for the project part?
I can try to take that one.
Okay.
So, you know, basically how you're going to be carrying out the program. So how you're going to be implementing the program over the course of the program year. So, you know, obviously the grants are only for 1 year, and you'll have different activities that you're doing throughout the year. So say if you're, you know, for example, I keep using the job training example, so I'll just continue with that one. So if you're doing workshops, you know, say we're going to do 7 workshops and these are this is the frequency that we're going to have them. This is what we're thinking of in terms of the content of those workshops. You know, so just we want to have an idea of what exactly you're proposing to undertake during the program year. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Caitlin. How does the leverage score and leveraging score affect our application? The higher, the better. Am I reading that correctly? Yes, you're reading that correctly. So really, we want to see that you are bringing other resources to the program. As I mentioned previously, we will not be counting other county grants, but we want to see that and we know that, you know, you're applying for grants all year round. So it's not like you can necessarily tell us which funding is committed, but to the extent you're able to tell us other funding that you're bringing that in, that will increase the score. So of the 100 points, up to 10 is for leverage. So that's a pretty significant chunk. Can you talk more about your desire to fund fewer, larger grants? Is it best to ask for the 35K max? You know, I mean, I would ask for what you think you need for the program. Our thinking is really, you know, back in the day, many of you got $20,000 grants and that could pay for half an FTE, and that just isn't the case anymore. And so given that our reporting requirements are, as we've mentioned, not super fun, you know, we don't want to continue to put a burden on people for smaller grants. So really the idea is to kind of right size them a little bit more for the current economy and your current programs. But, you know, if $20,000 is what you need to sort of fill in the blanks, then we would encourage you to apply for that. I mean, don't apply for more than you need, obviously. All right, did we answer everyone's questions, and are there other ones? Okay, and if you've not signed in, if you please can your name and organization in the chat, that's helpful for us to know who's here. And again, please reach out to us with your program ideas. We you know, are really happy to talk them through with you so you don't waste your time filling out an application that may or may not be appropriate or you know, may not even be eligible. So we don't have our contact information in the slide, but we'll send that out to you as well.
Well, and it's in the NoFA, in the
Oh, and it's
application.
the NoFA. Thanks,
Yeah.
Caitlin.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Wonderful. All right, so we're going to move on to the second half of our workshop. We hope you will stick around. Karen, are you here? I think I saw you.
She's here.
I am. Good morning.
Hi, Karen. So I'm excited to introduce Karen Gulliford, who is a executive coach and trainer. She has an organization called Great Workplaces, and as I mentioned earlier, I've worked with her on some stuff, and she's a really great trainer. So we're excited she's here. She's going to talk about conflict resolution, and not that we're all full of conflict, but of course, you know, conflict happens in workplaces. So we thought that would be a useful workshop for all of us to learn about what are some ways to identify and address conflict in your workplace. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
Hi, good morning. And thank you, Jennifer and Caitlin, for having me today. And I've just been sitting in just for a few minutes, and sounds like there's lots of exciting opportunities for all of you. So I would like to take the rest of this time to talk about a topic that is something that I think all workplaces can relate to, which is about managing conflict in your organizations. Caitlin, did you get a copy of my slides yesterday, or do you want me to try to share mine?
I did. I can pull them up for you.
Okay, we can do it either way. So looks like you all have are coming from many different types of organizations, and I'm not going to have you go back and reintroduce, but I was just thinking, if you could, while we're getting the slides pulled up in the chat, if you could just maybe talk a little bit about what you'd like to explore today, or talk about, or maybe what are some common conflict situations that you may be encountering in your work. So if you could just use the chat for that and just chime in, and thank you all for hanging on. It sounds like y'all are going through a lot of stuff today. I really hope that this will be helpful and that you'll walk away with some good strategies today. But if you could just pop in the chat your name, and if you want to talk about where you're from, what your organization's name is, and explain where you're finding that there's conflict in your organizations, or something that you'd like to talk about and explore today. Okay, so I'm getting a couple of responses here. Not really conflict, but can be tricky when you're so grateful for volunteer help, but they need to hold their work to high standards. So maybe that, providing feedback to performance issues, absolutely. Often processing change and occasionally growing pains, and conflict comes from change, absolutely. Holding people accountable in a constructive way. Yep. So sometimes we have to deliver critical feedback, and maybe you're worried about how the person will take it. Hi, Angela with Salvation Army. Since we're talking about grants, sometimes get pushback from our social services staff. They want to focus on the work, but I need the stats and stories too. Yeah, you gotta, I heard you all talk about reporting, like you need the numbers. So you got to do the whole thing. So there may be some differences there. Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you all for doing that. So
The
Caitlin,
PowerPoint is just coming. Sorry, it's taking forever to load, but I'm just getting it pulled up now. I apologize.
That's okay. I just want to make sure if I can see it or not. So I'll just share that conflict is part of life, right? It's part of being human on this earth, and conflict can come in many different forms. I want to talk about that today. And as you all have already said, it shows up just in something that you think is simple as giving someone feedback, and it could cause a conflict situation. So maybe by the end of this session, you can think about ways to handle it so that it can maybe minimize the feeling of conflict, and can actually be very productive. Okay, so I titled this "Don't Let Conflict Ruin Your Culture," and I say that because sounds like you all do a lot of work, and you've got a lot of goals, a lot of things that you want to achieve, and you don't want to let conflict ruin your strategies, your programs, your momentum, your engagement. And so also, we know culture drives everything. The way people feel about coming to work every day, keeping people mission focused, that is part of your culture. And so we want to be able to recognize it early when it's maybe rearing its head. We also want to find out how we can plan for it. And then we want to just manage it day to day as well. So that's what I'm hoping to do. So, okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And we think we've already done this. And so my objectives today are to talk about, why do we have conflict? Like, what's going on in our world today where we just have conflict. I want to talk about a definition of conflict and also the many different ways that you can experience conflict. We're going to talk about managing through it on just a regular, practical, day-to-day kind of basis. And then maybe we'll even find a way that we can prevent it. Now, all conflict is not going to be preventable. Again, we're all human and we just can't prevent it from happening. It's part of living and interacting with other people. And then I'll stay on and hang out for a little while after to see what kind of questions you might have. So that's the goal. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. I'm going to show you all a picture. So I don't know if you all know who this is, but I decided to show you all a picture of me. I was probably, I guess, 8 or 9 years old in this picture. So why would I bring up a picture of me when I was a little kid? And I know y'all are loving my dress that my mom made me, right? My mom used to sew my clothes. And she was a very good seamstress. And we learned very early how to handle conflict in our life. And some of you all may have grown up in environments where conflict was common and people disagreed, maybe even raised their voices, yelled and screamed all the time. Thank you for the heart. And some of you all grew up in maybe households where you weren't supposed to disagree or raise your voice. That was considered really bad. That was a little bit more of my experience growing up. I grew up here in Virginia. My parents are wonderful parents, and they're still alive, and they raised us very well, but they did not like any disagreement. And it was very much a hierarchy in my family environment where the parents were the boss and the kids were not the boss, and the kids were to obey their parents. That was at home, church, anywhere. And we were to be quiet and to do what we were told. And that's the way that my family felt that you were supposed to keep peace in the home. And those early experiences really shape how we interact with conflict later on in our lives, whether we are involved in personal relationships, marriages, partnerships, business partners, how we show up and come to work every day. School has a lot to do with how we're shaped around conflict. If we feel free enough to even raise our hand in a school environment and share our opinion or answer a question, it really starts at a very, very young age. So would anybody like to share in the chat how they were programmed? I call it programmed early in your life to deal with and handle conflict. What would you all say? I just shared a little bit about me. We were to be quiet and to be obedient, and conflict was considered very negative. So what about some of you all? Good experiences, bad experiences? Jennifer said, nope, no conflict in my house. Yep. Yep. Noelle as well. Not comfortable hearing about hard feelings. Yeah, it's like keep it happy, everybody smile, and that starts so young, right? Very early. Okay. I've had some people respond that their household was loud and rambunctious every single day of their life. And some people said it was cultural. Some people talk about their I think one person told me that they were like a house full of Italians, and they just are very expressive and they use their hands and they just kind of talk all over each other all the time, and that was normal. And Alexandra said, get the fight over with and move on. That is how you're shaped early. Like, we're going to duke it out and then, okay, whatever. And we're not going to hold on to it. And Wendy, as long as we did things the way my dad wanted, everything was fine. It's either mom or dad, right? So thank you all for sharing that. Yeah, we learned really early. So let's talk about kind of what's happening in our world today and why we are experiencing conflict. So let's go to the next slide, Caitlin. We're living in some interesting times, right? So first of all, the pace that things change One of you mentioned earlier that there's conflict over just changing. Well, we have to. So that's a given that we can't run companies and run families or anything the way that we did even 5 or 10 years ago. And it's for so many reasons. So we've got technology advancements. Um, I'm noticing in a lot of organizations that I'm working with that are experiencing conflict and issues with understanding how to work in a team or how to understand people's roles and who's doing what and keeping up with the fast pace of meeting all of those deadlines, that the lack of technology is the problem. It's crazy. But it's like, because we're in such a fast paced environment, if we aren't embracing the technology, it's going to get really, really hard to get anything done. So we have to move quickly. And as soon as you think you understand technology, it's going to move again. You know, we're now moving into this age of AI. We have to figure out what to do with this. So things are expected to move quickly, and people to work faster and more collaboratively in a faster way. We're also in this post-pandemic era. And I think a lot of organizations and people and families are trying to figure out, like, who do we want to be now? Are we, we're really not maybe the same people that we were 4 or 5 years ago. And maybe we don't want to be. Maybe our organizations need to shift. Maybe we learned something from the pandemic and we want to use that learning to figure out where we're going next. So that causes a lot of change and ambiguity. Then there's this thing called VUCA, VUCA. I don't know if any of you have heard of this before, but VUCA is an acronym for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. There's just so much that is happening that is changing. We're not sure, not necessarily clear all the time, but it's kind of the norm that we have this rapid pace of change. Um, and um, Due to the pandemic and so many changes in our world, we have, think of all the generations we have working together. We have people that are not retiring at 55 and 65 years old, they're staying. And we have people coming in the workplace who are 21, 22 years old. My daughter just graduated from college in May. She's 21 years old. She's working in a full-time environment for the first time. And there's multiple generations in the workplace, and she's trying to learn and figure out her place in the world while she's working with people who could possibly be a grandparent, all in the same place. And their expectations are very different. The level of autonomy and flexibility and mobility and working from home and all of these things are so different. And this concept of team, research is showing that one of the biggest changes that we've encountered post-pandemic is people used to all go in the office and they used to form teams and they would form groups and they would rally around each other in the workplace to get work done. They could go down the hall and talk to people. Now people are more individualized and some are working at home and everyone's not on the same schedule. And, you may be working on a project with a team, but everybody's not together anymore. They're kind of dispersed. Some people have even moved away out of the area, but they're still considered part of the workplace and part of the team. So all of this is happening in the background. And we wonder why it's so challenging to interact and get things done. And we haven't even talked about like client demands and just what our customers are looking for as well. Okay, so keep that in mind. So these are some of the things going on around us. So Caitlin, the next slide. So let's talk about what's going on in us, in our minds. So let's talk about the brain. So this is some very interesting research. Um, I'm sorry I didn't quote where the research came from, and I can share that with you later. So 80% of our thoughts are negative, and 95% of those thoughts are repetitive. It's like, wow. And there's actually a term for it. It's called automatic negative thoughts, or ants. So throughout the day, as soon as we wake up in the morning, we start thinking what's not going to work right. um, all the things that I have to do today that I probably don't want to do today. a problem left over maybe from yesterday, and oh my God, and we start to go down this path of thinking the worst. It's kind of sad, but if you think about it, our minds tend to go that way. If we have an interaction with someone and they didn't answer the question or didn't respond the way that we thought they would, we automatically think something's wrong. Like, oh my God, why did she say that? Or that was really mean, or maybe she doesn't like me, or I don't think, maybe we're not on the same page. And it's possibly not even true, probably not true. But our minds tend to go negative very, very quickly. And we tend to repeat and think about it over and over and over again. So that's filling our heads all day long. So what do you all think about that? So we have all of these external factors. The world is moving so quickly. We're changing all around us. Expectations of what people expect when they come to work. We've got technology and things moving quickly. And then during the day, we're not thinking very positively. We tend to go negative very quickly as soon as we have an interaction with someone. Does that sound right to you all? Or is that a surprise, maybe? Yeah. Sounds right. So we've got to figure out what to do with this. Now, the question is all conflict bad, and is all conflict negative? And can some conflict possibly we can use that to leverage us for something positive? So, and Kathleen, I love your comment. Our minds are a very powerful tool when we use it correctly. Yeah. So we have to constantly get kind of a grip on our thinking throughout the day, because we know that there's going to be tons of interactions, tons of messaging coming at us all day. So we've got to work super hard at not going negative all the time, whether that's internal with your staff, with one of your partners. We have to really be careful, right? Or we're gonna really spin ourselves in a place where we're not going to get a whole lot done, and we could possibly ruin a lot of really important relationships. Okay, so let's talk about the definition. Okay, so I have another picture for you. So this is my puppy. Well, she's not really a puppy anymore. This is Maggie, and she just turned 2 last week. And I'll tell you why I put a picture of her there. So here's a definition from the Center of Conflict Dynamics. I may have shared with Jennifer and Caitlin that I'm a workplace mediator, and I was trained through the Center of Conflict Dynamics at Eckerd College down in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I've been studying conflict and communication for a very long time. I just like this definition because I think it covers everything. It's any situation in which people have apparently incompatible goals, interests, principles, or feelings. And I think that covers it all. Here's the thing. Conflict, there's actually 2 types of conflict. There's something called a task conflict, and there's a person conflict. There are 2 different types of conflict. So task conflict is a disagreement or incompatibility about how to do something, right? So let's say that you and a colleague are going to be working on, I think you all were talking about grant applications, right? So let's just say after today, you get together with a colleague and you all decide that you're going to figure out a strategy on how to work on an application. And you have a great idea and you think this is definitely our strategy for getting this done. And your colleague says, "No, I don't think that's a really good idea. We should be doing it this way." Okay, so is that a task conflict or is that a personal conflict? Right? So a task conflict means we disagree about the strategy. So let's talk about your idea and let's talk about my idea, right? We might even come up with alternative ideas. We might even bring in another person who has an idea. We might do a pros and cons list. We might seek the help and call Caitlin and ask her some more questions because we don't know which is the right way. But we're focused on the task and we're focused on the process. Suppose now you and your colleague, you get mad at each other and immediately start tearing down the person, but not the problem on the grant application. Now that's different. So imagine focusing on the person and what a terrible person they are for not agreeing with me, or she's always coming up with these weird ideas, or she's just trying to bully me and take control over me and she's always trying to, be the boss. Well, now that sounds personal, right? We're not talking about the application anymore and the process and the strategy. We're now going after each other. So do you all see the difference? So conflict can have two different paths. You can stay focused on the process and things that are real and the program or the way to do something or the task, or we can focus on the person. And I bet you can figure out which one is easier to resolve, right? Staying focused on the task, we can resolve that. Once you get focused on personalities and start going after a person and who they are, that's when things get really ugly and they get very hurtful very quickly. So the reason for the dog there, my little Maggie, is that I just took a picture of her because she looked really mad at me. And she has this kind of pouty little face and she just kind of puts her chin on her paw like she's disgusted. And I'm like, what is wrong? I'm like, I just took you for a walk, just fed you, you've had treats. What's wrong? And I realized maybe she's just tired. Maybe she just like, I'm chilling, I'm happy, I'm content. And this is just my resting face, but nothing's really wrong. Or she's just trying to say something simple like, I'm waiting for you to put some more water in the bowl. So it could be something that simple. But we immediately, because we have our negative thinking, our ants going on, those automatic negative thoughts, we tend to go negative. And it may not be negative. And we're focusing on personal things or taking it personally. And really, it's just, we should just focus on the task. So what do you all think about this? Can you see the two different types of conflict? Maybe you're thinking of a situation right now that's going on with you, and you're probably thinking, maybe it's going personal. And it doesn't have to be personal. Maybe I need to bring it back to more of the process or the task. And so I've got a comment here. Thank you, Tanya. There has to be psychological safety within the team. Trust is essential. One of my favorite quotes about conflict is from Pat Lencioni from his book, The Advantage. It's when there is trust, conflict comes nothing but the pursuit of truth, an attempt to find the best possible answer. Oh, I love that. I love that. Conflict becomes nothing but the pursuit of truth, an attempt to find the best possible answer. So that sounds, Tanya, like it's focused on the task and the business problem, right? Yeah. I love that quote. I'm going to steal that. I love it. I like Pat Lencioni. Very cool. Any other comments, questions, thoughts? Maybe you can think of something going on right now where it's gotten off the rails because it's gotten personal, right? Power struggles. Yeah. Power struggles are one of the biggest areas of conflict. Territories. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So here's the question. Can conflict be positive? We're talking about conflict currently as if it's really, really negative and really, really bad. And some of it is, especially if it's personal, right? If we're taking it personal and we're making it personal, then it's definitely not going to be so pleasant. But there can be some conflict that is very healthy and positive. And as Tanya in her quote, an attempt to find the best possible answer. So then it becomes a process of finding that possibility that maybe we don't even know about yet. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So here's a diagram that I made up. Forgive me, I'm not a great graphic designer, but I have this, I wanted to just kind of give you a visual of the different, I guess, the spectrum of conflict, right? So where you see the one egg, that signifies, you know, kind of like we were talking about the way we grew up with our families, like everybody just keep the peace, be quiet, stay silent, fall in line, agree with dad, agree with mom, you know, keep your mouth shut, right? Because this is order, you know, and order means we don't disagree, we don't get loud, you know, we just kind of stay in our place. And some other ways to describe that is a term called groupthink. And groupthink I see a lot in organizations as well. You know, you have a staff meeting and the boss says, look, I'm just telling you what I think the answer could be. What do you all think? Please share questions or other alternatives or what you all think. And everybody goes, no, no, everything's fine. And they all shake their head. They all shake their head. And there are other ideas in the room. But to keep the peace and to keep things moving, or maybe I really want to go to lunch, we just say everything sounds fine. That's called groupthink. And it's really not healthy, because we are not looking for the best possible answer. We're just looking more to keep the peace and keep the silence. And there's no discussion. The meetings are very quiet and there's one leader. And maybe it is because there's no trust in the process or there's no trust in the leader, but it's quiet. Okay, so that's not really healthy. So let's go over to where the eggs are splattered all over the place. So we don't want that either, where there's continuous disruption, chaos, outbursts, confusion, anger, aggressive behavior. We don't want that. I mean, that's like not even what you want your workplace to be like. And you don't really want that at home either. It's just constant uproar all the time. It's very stressful, causes a lot of anxiety, depression, and you never get to any good answers that way. And people haven't really learned the skill of moderating their emotions. That could mean that there's lack of trust, low emotional intelligence, or people have just allowed people to do that with no repercussions, and it goes on. So that's no good, because we're getting nowhere. It's just chaos all the time. So in the middle, you can see we've got a nice array of diversity, and we have order, but we do have multiple ideas or concepts in the room. Okay, so that's the right amount of conflict. We're discussing, we're collaborating, we're involved, we're engaged, we have trust, we believe in inclusion, we believe in growth, we have a growth mindset, we believe that we can come to a solution. That's really healthy. So if you think that it's healthy because nobody's saying anything at work or in your team meetings, there's probably some dysfunction in that. There should be some good, healthy discussion. And that's where we are able to get to the best possible answer, to the best solutions, and to the best business outcomes. So we've got to have a little bit of that tension, and that is healthy. Okay. All right. So next slide. All right. So let's talk even deeper about digging in a little bit deeper and allowing some of that conflict to come up. So here's another one of my great designs that I came up with. So here's a piece of key lime pie, which I love, by the way. And I find that most pieces of pie have 3 layers to it, usually. There's the crust, there's the middle part, and then there's some kind of icing or something really yummy on top, okay? So let's start with the top of that piece of pie. This is the easy stuff, right? You're having a meeting or you're talking with a subordinate, you're having one of your supervision, one of your coaching sessions, And it's kind of like we keep it light, we keep it easy, and it's predictable. So how's it going? What are we doing? What are we working on? Great. Okay. So there any issues, any problems? Okay. Nope. Everything's fine. Great. Okay. See you next week. Okay. That's the way a lot of people do business. And a lot of relationships are like that. They just kind of keep them on the surface, right? So if we go a little deeper, we can use the middle part of the pie, okay, which is good. So we're now talking about maybe some problems with a client. Maybe there's a problem with that grant application. How do we figure this out? What do we do about this? Hey, I've got a problem over here. Can you help me? Gee, I might need some more resources. Okay, great. So you're talking about the substance of work, which is also very good. And most meetings sound something like that. Like, what are we working on? What's the deadline? Who's doing what? What problems are we running into? Do we need more resources? Do we need more things? Do we need this or need that? And that's really good. And you need to have those meetings because you got to keep your projects going. But here's the crust. The crusty part is where we begin to think about the way we're thinking, and we begin to challenge the current system. And this is something that is actually discouraged in organizations and discouraged in your team meetings because, oh my gosh, we've only got an hour, we got to get out of here. And so we stay with the fluffy part, or we stay maybe in the middle, and then we don't go any further. And there may be things that we really need to talk about as a team because we keep running into the same problem over and over and over again, or we're not talking about a performance issue. We're not talking about something that is getting in the way of our success. Or we may need to talk about the way you and I are working together. We need to talk about something that is uncomfortable, but we need to get it out the way. And so think about how you're having your meetings and your interactions. Do we need to go even deeper sometimes and really work through maybe a conflict that's kind of underneath, but we just are afraid to touch it? And there's a way to do that in a very healthy, productive way. And it will make work go so much quicker in the end. So maybe you can reflect on that and think a little bit if that could be helpful for you as a leader. Okay, I'll just check in here. Any questions or comments before we go into some of the strategies and tips and techniques that we might be able to use? Anything so far? I hope this is helpful to this point. Awesome. Okay, so I shared the definition of conflict with you, right? So conflict is sometimes has to deal with our perceptions, and they may not even be real, but we perceive that we have a problem. Okay. So here's the other thing about conflict. There's two different ways to deal with conflict. So we talked about the two types of conflict, but also there's two different responses. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then I just want to share with you, and we don't have a lot of time to go into this today, but we all have triggers, right? We have hot buttons. So some of you all shared like what your households were like when you grew up and how you went through school and how mom and dad raised you. That creates hot buttons inside of us. It's the way that we are kind of designed to respond when conflict comes up, and it is going to come up. Some of us kind of go right in it, with our fire hose and say, well, let's go at it. And some people are like, oh my God, this is very uncomfortable. I can't do this. And we avoid it. It just depends. But we all have hot buttons. Some things are going to bother you more than others. And you're going to notice this with the people that you work with every day. Some people are very sensitive, and things will happen that don't go their way and they melt down. And then some people are like tough as nails. It's just like everything is like screwed up and people are upset and nothing's working right. And they're like, you know what? We'll be okay. It just depends. We're all wired a little differently. Let's see. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So I want to go back to those two different paths. Remember, we talked about it being task and we talked about it being personal, right? So this is where we see the difference between constructive responding and destructive responding. Okay. Because if we keep it on the task, we're going to tend to get through it better and it's probably less disruptive. If we focus on the person and all the personalities and we make it personal because our minds just tend to go negative so often, then it's going to be more of a hostile situation and the conflict tends to linger a lot longer and everybody feels bad and it just feels very unhealthy and toxic, as some people may even call it, right? So remember, we have a hot button. Some of us have different things that upset us, you know. When I took the conflict dynamics profile, which is the assessment tool that goes with this, so, you know, some of my personal hot buttons were people who were unreliable. That's just my thing. If you tell me that we're gonna go meet for coffee at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning and you don't show up, I'm like, oh my God. It's like I got out of bed, got dressed, came over here, and you know, or unreliable could just be I'm waiting on people to do their part of the project so that I can get this thing in. And nobody does their part. It's like, oh my God, that like for me, that's really annoying. Um, Another one of mine was you know, like I forgot what it is. So it's called I forgot the term, but when people like ignore me, I think aloof, right? Aloof is like people who just are like really nonchalant and just don't really acknowledge you or engage you or walk by you and don't say hello. I'm like, what? Like, so that's really annoying to me. But for other people, it may not be. But we all have them. So you have your hot button, the thing that irritates you, pisses you off, makes you mad, makes you really go nuts. But then we have to either decide, okay, do I need to stay focused on what are we doing here? Or am I just going to go in on the person? There's two different paths to dealing with conflict. And one is constructive and one is destructive. You want to use as many constructive responses as possible and not the destructive ones. So on the next slide, Caitlin, I'm just going to share a few of the constructive ones. I want to focus on what we can do that's very positive. These are some of the constructive strategies. Okay. One of them is reaching out. Reaching out means that, I'm noticing that we're having differences here. Either we just had a bad conversation or the way that we did something did not work right, or I saw some behavior that was not appropriate and I need to deal with it. So that means you go first and you go to the person. You extend the olive branch. You address it early. You try to catch it early. It's called reaching out. You send an email. Do you have a few minutes? I want to talk. Okay, somebody's got to go first. You can't just keep going around and around and avoiding it. So I think that this is a good leadership skill that you all learn how to reach out and go first. Okay, so that's very healthy. It's very constructive and it actually reduces the impact of conflict. The second one is taking perspective. Taking perspective is something that you can do because we tend to think negative a lot. You stop yourself and you go, well, maybe I should think about how the other person might be feeling right now. And so, in other words, you try to take a walk in the other person's shoes. Okay, this is a very inclusive behavior in your workplace. Sometimes when we don't understand people or why they're doing things, or they look like they're acting out, try to take perspective. What could be going on with that person? Think about their experiences or just how they might be feeling in the moment that might be different than the way that I feel. The third one is adapting. I would describe adapting as being flexible, right? Do I need to win every single fight? Like, is it that important? Or, this is something pretty small and I work with this person or I'm in a relationship with this person. They're different than me and it's not a big deal. Like, I'll just be flexible and we'll just do it your way. It's fine. Like, I don't have to do it my way. I like it my way because it's my way and, I'm used to it, but we don't have to. So that's being flexible, it's being adaptable. And the last one is delaying your response. So whatever you're feeling, no matter how hot-headed you feel at the time, or even though you really want to say something because you just want to like kind of get back at them a little bit, just stop it and just wait and just ask yourself, why am I talking? Like, just sit there and just let it go for a second and kind of just calm yourself down, decompress, and maybe think about a response that would be better later. Now, it doesn't say don't respond, it says delay. Delay the response because it gives your brain a chance to get out of that negative mode and think about something more productive. Okay? And get your mind back on the problem and off of the personality conflict, right? So delay the response, don't not respond or never respond or avoid responding, just delay it. Okay, so those are constructive. So guess what? Destructive are the opposite of those. So destructive would be, instead of reaching out, you go talk to other people and avoid it and just kind of stir up a bunch of stuff, right? So that's the opposite. Taking perspective, the opposite would be just assuming your way is the only way. The opposite of adapting is shutting other people's ideas down or not giving a staff member an opportunity to lead. And the opposite of delaying response is to say things that you probably shouldn't say in the moment because you're really upset. Okay. Another constructive strategy is expressing an emotion, is telling the other person, I'm really upset about this situation, or I'm not feeling like we're working together well. I know that sounds really like kind of mushy and like, but it's healthy. Like, I don't agree. I don't think we're in a good place. I don't feel very good. Okay. All right. So just looking at a couple of comments. So Jennifer, thanks for coming. So Tanya, believing the best in your team member and taking a posture of humanity in the conversation. Absolutely. We're just people, right? We're all just trying to make our way in the world. Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. So I hope that helps just kind of look at the differences. So constructive strategies reduce conflict much faster. Destructive responses, you tend to stay on that negative part of your brain and you shut people down, you don't listen, you respond and say things you shouldn't say in the moment. A destructive response is avoiding it and not doing anything. That's not healthy, right? So we've got to find more of the constructive ways to deal with it. All right, so I thought we could pause here for just a quick second and just have maybe some reflection or if you want to come off mute and just share, hopefully we've got a few minutes to do that, or you can use the chat. So let's think, where do we have conflict in your organizations right now? Is it with staff? Is it with some of your partners that you're working with? Is it in your leadership team? Things like that. So I have a question. How about avoidance? Avoidance is destructive. Very good question. Avoidance is destructive. Responding delaying your response is constructive. Okay, so let's just make sure we're clear. Delaying, and your delay could be 5 minutes. Okay. I read somewhere research shows that in order for you to cool off, it takes about 55 minutes. Right? So if it's something really bad, like really, really bad, you need to go like leave the building, get in your car, go get some food, and then come back. right? Take your lunch break. But it could be as short as a few minutes. Yep. So delay, but if you avoid and never address it, it's destructive because it just stews, it just stays with you. It's a great question. Okay. All right. So some of you mentioned staff conflict. What other conflicts? Partners, vendors. Sometimes there could be conflict just with your leadership team. Excuse me, peers. And what kind of strategies do you think that you might want to use now that we've talked a little bit about constructive? What are maybe some other strategies that you might want to use? And I didn't list them all, of course, just for time, but so Jennifer mentions your children. Absolutely. And children stay with you for a long time. My daughter's almost 22. If you're a parent, you have a generational difference automatically. So you're going to see things differently. So we have to try to listen. Okay, we have to be adaptable, right? They're not going to do things the way that we did them. Okay. And my other reflection question is, what is a potential positive outcome from this conflict? So think about the conflict that you might be having. And remember, there's a lot of positives that can come out of it because we may come out learning something new about each other, or we just learn how to work with each other differently. We can earn respect. A lot of trust can come out of that. The fact that we can air out our feelings and it doesn't have to we don't have to take each other out. We just want to talk about our differences. It can be very healthy. Any other thoughts or conflicts that are among you that you wanted to chat about? And I'll hang on a little bit after this if anybody wants to talk about anything specifically. I appreciate you all hanging on. I know you've had a long morning and gone through a lot of information. So I hope that this is helping and getting you to think about some of your situations. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Caitlin, I wanted to just share a little bit and talk about some of the strategies or things that you might want to do. So I tend to be very, very practical, and not knowing exactly what's happening with everyone here on this call today. But here are some things that I'm noticing that I think will be something you can start to think about that you might want to implement if you don't have it already. So first of all, I want to talk about your internal teams. So if you all are leaders, if you manage a team, or even if you just manage a process and don't manage a team. So here's a few things that you might want to think about to prevent future conflicts. So the first one is focus on organizational values and civil workplace policies. So sometimes we have forgotten that we have a mission, we have a vision and strategies, and we have values in our organization. We also have probably an employee handbook or some type of document that tells us what is acceptable and not acceptable in the workplace. So that will kind of hold you together if you don't know what to do, if you've got conflicts that are going on that are not going well. We've got to come back to, what are we here for? What are our values that we should be living by every day? And I can guarantee you, if you have a value statement, there's probably at least one value in there that talks about the way that we treat each other or treat our customer, right? And then if you don't have one, you should have some type of employee policy around, civility or how we treat each other and what is acceptable and not acceptable behavior, right? So hopefully you don't have a lot of crazy conflicts going on, but there should be some policies to kind of hold people accountable to good behavior. Okay, so that will kind of encourage you to do training around it. So if we have a policy on things that we should or shouldn't do, then we should train our people around that. The second one is create a way for employee voices to be heard. So as a mediator, I've noticed that the reason a lot of people uh, blow up or have a really bad interaction or do something they shouldn't do or say bad things to other people is because I feel that they haven't had an opportunity to really express the way they're feeling to someone. So there's a lot going on in the workplace. Again, we just talked about how there's so much change and just ambiguity and things that are happening. And then people bring all that negativity with them every day. So what is your process for giving people a place to express if they are unhappy or if they feel that they've been treated unfairly or if they just have an idea or they want something to be done differently or if they find that they're really triggered by something, who can they talk to? So you can do that in the form of asking them specifically. You can do that in the form of a survey. You can do that in the form of having some other type of place, back long time ago, some of you all may remember this. They used to have like the little suggestion box. I know it sounds really old, but there's modern ways to do that, is to have people be able to share. Also, of course, is the training, conflict management, change management, emotional intelligence. These are things that sometimes, we don't learn these things in school. We don't learn sometimes these things at home, but we have to have skill in how to communicate with other people. So there's classes for that. So think about where you could use some training just to kind of reiterate some of these good communication skills. And then my last one, my tip is to designate a workplace mediator. If something does happen in the workplace, do you have someone on your HR staff, or do you have someone who maybe is not directly involved with those people? Who can people go to if they need someone? Mediation just means someone to sit between two people and just help them communicate and figure out what they want to do, figure out a better way to come to a better solution. So think about designating someone who can act as that person. And then for your partners, here's a couple of tips that I would share with you as well. So when I was trained to be a coach, one of the things that they trained us in was to contract with your client. And what that meant is, and some of you may do this with some of your other work, is you basically have a set of rules on how we're going to work together. And it would help us have kind of a roadmap for when things would get off track. So part of your contract may be, if we disagree on a quality issue, what are we going to do? Part of our contract may be that we will have a meeting once a month on every fourth Friday for 30 minutes to talk about any issues or concerns that we have with this partnership that we have together. That's part of a contract. We will make sure that if you're unhappy with any of the work, I've got a clause in some of my contracts that please don't wait until my invoice comes and you're unhappy with something. I mean, it doesn't happen, but I don't want anybody to be unhappy with anything I'm doing and they're not telling me. So I just put it in the contract. If there's anything that comes up and you're kind of like worried about it, or you don't think it's going well, please tell me so that I can deal with it. So have a contract well in advance, which includes a mediation process as well. If we disagree and we can't figure it out, who's going to come bail us out? Who's going to help us, right? Handle miscommunications and conflicts early. Again, delay your response. Don't go negative right away and jump on it and start emailing a bunch of stuff back immediately. but just kind of wait back a little bit. Try to take perspective, try to look at everything, cool off, calm down, and then go back and say, I'd like to clarify, or I think we need to talk about this, or I'm not sure where we're going with this. Can we talk about it and do it early? So don't wait until, months later, and then it's just gets worse. And then the last one suggestion is to get to know the players. Um, Another thing that I've noticed as a mediator is a lot of people, they just jump right into the work together, and they just start, barreling down the task list and just start doing stuff, and they really don't know each other. And because we tend to go negative 80% of the time, when something does go wrong down the road, we automatically think it's personal, and it's not. So get to know people, um, ask them, about their experience. Ask them what kind of work they've done before. Say, hey, we're getting ready to do this partnership together. What does success look like for you? How would you like to interact with me? What would be a good time for us to talk, and how do you want to deal with problems that may come down the road? What is something that works for you? Well, let me tell you what works for me. So get to know people a little bit, even on a personal level. If you can, spend some time with them before you just jump into the work. It will really, really help, and not send people down into a negative space every time something happens, right? Or every time you get an email, it just doesn't look good, and you're like, oh my God. But if you know the person, you tend to think a little bit more positively and like, oh, they didn't really mean it that way. So get to know people. Okay, so that's about all I have. I know I went through a lot of stuff really fast. Um, and I didn't have an opportunity to go through every single one of the constructive strategies and all of the destructive strategies, but I just hope that gave you an idea of some things that you can try. Um, so I have another question. Is negative management strategy of conflict handling always harmful? Negative management of conflict. So do you want to share with me maybe exactly what you mean by a negative management strategy? So what you might mean is, sometimes do you need to avoid or need to do something destructive to just kind of get through it? Um, so avoidance, possibly. Very rarely, because it tends to just fester and stay. Um, Obviously, if there is a situation where you think it could be harmful for you to engage with a person, yes, I would avoid. And I would get help, and I would get support. Um, Most of us, I believe, are capable of handling conflict situations directly, with some practice and with some skills. Some of us are not wired to do this, but we should learn it, and we should get more comfortable with it. It will make us better leaders. It will help us get more things done. It will build more confidence, and better communication. So usually I would say no, but in very, very rare occasions, yes, avoidance might be the healthier way to go. Um, and Noelle has a question. I think sometimes it's okay to just let things go, like a snarky comment here and there. Yeah. Now, if it's a pattern and they're snarky all the time and it's really starting to impact you, one of the constructive strategies is to express an emotion, which means you go to the person and say, I feel really hurt when you say these things in a meeting. It's really embarrassing, and it's not healthy for other people to hear it. And it's really beginning to upset and impact me. Um, because if you just kind of take it in and suck it in over time, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to start avoiding that person. It can create a lot of anxiousness. Not being able to tell people how they make you feel can cause a depression. So ex- it depends. If it's just a one-time thing, then maybe it's like, okay. But if you feel like this is something this person does a lot, especially when this happens, they tend to do this frequently. and it's really starting to impact you in an emotional way, then you should address it. Yeah. But if it's a one-time thing, yeah, probably let it go. So thank you for bringing that up. Anything else? So I'm just going to hang here for a little while. Jennifer, Caitlin, thank you so much for having me. I don't know when people are scheduled to hop off, but I'm going to be here if there's any additional questions. If not, I just want to say thank you again, and I appreciate you having me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn at Karen C. Gulliford, and my email is Karen@great-workplaces if you have any questions or comments or anything like that. So I know it's been a long morning. Thank you for all of your participation. You have great questions. And I hope
Thank you so much, Karen. Is it okay if we share your presentation with the group?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yes,
So
I did send it in a PDF. So yeah, absolutely.
So we'll be sharing that, and we really appreciate that. Lots of good tips and lots of good food for thought. And thank you all for joining. Have a great day. Stay cool. And feel free to reach out to Caitlin if you have proposal questions. Feel free to reach out to Karen if you want her to fix your conflict.
I don't know about that, but we can definitely talk about it.
We could try. Christy, how we can view the recording? I think we will mail it. We will mail it. I'm so old school. We will email you the recording and the presentations, and we'll also post it on our website. So we'll send all that information out to you if you registered and put your name in the chat. Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.